Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hormone Helper Podcast. I'm Coach Andrew, your hormone helper from Fit for All Fitness. I personally coach over 1,600 men and women to help better understand their hormones so they can lose weight and get their metabolism back on track. With this podcast, you're going to hear from me and my special guests about everything from metabolism to thyroid to weight loss. And we even talk a little bit of sexy time as we chat to spread more knowledge thick like butter on your hormones. If you're ready to learn, I'm ready to share, so let's do this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hormone Helper Podcast. I'm Coach Andrew, your hormone helper and nutritionist, and today we are going to get down into the macrosa, let's say, of nutrition and seeing results with weight loss. By the way, just so you know, macrosa is not a word, not Spanish. I don't even know what it is. I just thought it was a lot fancier than saying macros and macronutrients, because whenever I say macronutrients, people just think bodybuilding and they're like, what the heck? So we're going to call it macrosa through this good stuff. But I want to talk about this today because in my 8 years of the health space, I can say that counting and tracking macros has never really left the health and the wellness industry. There have been tons of apps that people are still using right now to build around the entire system of tracking every ounce of your food. For example, MyFitnessPal, TrueCoach, Noom, I believe, is the latest one. Now, while all of these apps teach the process of counting nutrients slightly differently, they're all dealing with or having you alter in some shape or form your daily nutrients, which is what macros are. Now, for those of you who don't know where macros came from, I'd actually like to fill you in because it explains a lot of where the percentages come from. So tracking your macros became the go-to after the start of the old school bodybuilding days, where people like Arnold and Ferrigno used to dick it out. They used to duke it out by flexing at each other. So essentially, when people used to take bodybuilding seriously as a sport, they started doing a lot of research showing that there was a huge importance of protein intake for muscle growth and for their recovery. So when people started to focus significantly on their protein intake, they found that they were able to change the way their body looked for certain physique goals. Now, it wasn't until 1995 that a Dr. Barry Sears made the really popular diet, which was called the Zone Diet. And that actually took macros further by recommending kind of like a balanced ratio, specifically for bodybuilders and athletes. So Dr. Barry recommended that an athlete's diet should consist of 40% carbs, 30% proteins, and the remainder into 30% fats. So because a lot of bodybuilders started using this, it led to the idea that these magical ratios could be used to impact a regular person's health and weight management. Now, a lot of people have played with the percentages since the zone diet was made. And truthfully, the zone diet wasn't even the first diet to have the percentage change with the nutrients. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Atkins diet before. Some people have, some people haven't. But that low carb change up was actually started in 1972. So that's where Dr. Atkins told people to restrict their carb intake and increase both their fats and protein, which at that time was believed to help with a person's weight loss specifically. So why the heck am I telling you this and really getting into some back stuff? I'm telling you this because people, for 99% of the health and wellness space, whether it's old coaches, whether it's clients, whether it's personal trainers, they have most likely tracked their macros and weighed their food based on that really old information that you believe was actually good since 1972. So just as we know that science changes, we also have discovered and learned so much more about the body's metabolism, your thyroid function, as well as uncovered what changes from a hormone perspective that actually affects the way your body stores fat. It also affects the way the body stores energy or builds muscle as well. So although tracking and weighing your food to the last gram sounds super, super easy and viable, I wanted to go through why I don't use it with my clients, as well as what I found when using macros and working with them only, because I've done that as well personally myself. So if I look at close to the 200 people I've coached just this year, and this year's not over yet, I don't think that tracking your macros is the most effective approach for sustainable weight loss or maintenance. And I'm just going to put it out there, and I'm going to put it out there for these couple of reasons that I'm going to list. Point number one, I want to talk about these macronutrients versus micronutrients. So there is a large missing piece that people aren't putting a focus on, and that is micronutrients. And there's a difference between macronutrients, carbs, fats, and proteins, and micronutrients, which is vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. I had this really great example that I thought up about this. I want you to imagine your body's like a car, and you need different kinds of fuel to make it run smoothly. So these two types of fuels, I want you to call one macronutrients, the other one micronutrients. Macronutrients are like the big parts of your car engine, the ones that you need a lot of. You've got carbohydrates, the gasoline for your car. They give you quick energy to run around and play. Your proteins, think of proteins as repair tools for your car. They help fix and build things in your body like muscles and skin. And then you have your fats. Your fats are like the oil in your car engine. They keep things running smoothly and help your body absorb those important vitamins. Now, micronutrients, on the other hand, are like the small but super important nuts and bolts in your car engine. They don't actually give you energy to fix things directly, but they are what help your body do its job well. So essentially, there's two different types of micronutrients. There's vitamins. So these are like little helpers that make sure everything in your body works the way it should. Each vitamin has a special job, like helping you see in the dark, vitamin A, or keeping your bones strong, vitamin D. Second piece of the micronutrients is the minerals. So, minerals are like tiny workers that help your body actually build and repair strong bones, carry oxygen, and do many important tasks. So, I say this example because macronutrients are the big fuels that your body needs, the gasoline, the repair tools, and the engine oil. And micronutrients are the little helpers and workers that actually keep your body running smoothly. So both of them are essential to keep your body functioning and strong. The key is, though, is when people are focusing on macros, they tend to select foods. So they tend to select proteins, carbs, and fats that actually don't have a lot of vitamins and minerals that just cover the raw macros. And there's this kind of saying like, if it fits your macros, it's good. And this is how a lot of people tend to do nutrition. There's a fundamental problem with that. And I was actually talking to my brother about this a couple of days ago. He built a food plan for himself. He was making adjustments. And then when I was looking, I was like, well, a lot of the foods that you selected actually don't have a lot of vitamins and minerals. So although they cover the proteins, carbs, and fats, they're kind of empty. They're not going to do anything for your hormonal health. They won't do anything to help your thyroid or your metabolism or to improve your digestion. And that's essentially the large part of the challenge when it comes to focusing on macros. You lose the small workers and the helpers that we actually need inside of our body for us to be able to hormonally be okay with releasing weight. Because at the end of the day, all excess weight is, or excess fat is essentially just stored energy. It's stored nutrients, stored material that the body believes it needs to help repair. So, if we can fuel the body enough with the vitamins and minerals and do that repair ahead of time, have the energy ahead of time, then guess what? You're not going to need to store the weight that people are so paranoid about each and every case. Now, when people tend to focus on the macros, besides the fact that you're not getting those tiny little workers, you also have a high chance of leading to nutrient deficiencies, and it's nutrient deficiencies which lead to hormonal imbalances. So your body has a very limited kind of pouch within your body. Some of it's in the kidney, some of it's in the liver, in which it will store some of these excess nutrients in the event for you to use it for later. If you do not fuel your body with all of the proper nutrients, those stores become empty, and then your body will no longer make those hormones because it doesn't have the raw building blocks to do so. So, in that case, the body has no choice but to store fat or to refuse you from changing weight because it doesn't want to end up hindering like a long term change in your body or permanently changing your metabolism. The second thing that I want to talk about from a macro perspective is individual change in somebody's metabolism. So everyone's metabolism is unique and it's really influenced by different factors: genetics, age, hormones, or just to name a few. And before you go naming genetics as an excuse, it is a factor, but all factors can be worked with. So think of it this way: if your body's like a special recipe and your metabolism's like an oven that cooks the food, just like some ovens are big and powerful while others are kind of smaller and they take longer to cook, everyone's metabolism is a little bit different. So, like from a genetic standpoint, you could think of your genetics like a family recipe. So, your genetics are passed down, everyone uses the same recipe. So, your grandma's secret cookie recipe, might be different from your friend's grandma's recipe. And that's basically what your genetics is. Your genes make your metabolism a bit unique. So, some people have faster ovens and metabolism because of their genes, while other people have slower ones that take longer. Um, so because of that, with the genetic part of it, if you're trying to just label macros based off of someone's weight, their height, and their daily activity, it leaves that missing piece of, well, how fast or slow is their oven? How fast are they able to process food? Do they have a genetic recipe, so to say, that is different from someone else that's actually going to prevent them from seeing the results that they want to if they were just to track the macros? Now let's add into this kind of recipe thing the age. Think of age just like your oven is getting older. So just like ovens get older, they're not going to work as fast as they used to, and it's the same with your metabolism. So when you're a kid, your metabolism's a brand new oven. It's great. And then you grow up and then it can slow down because that oven has been used for many, many years. So if we expect to eat the same amount of nutrients, or macros, the proteins, carbs, and fats, like we did when we were younger, our body's not going to process them the same because it's burnt out, it's run down, it needs changes. You need to keep making sure that that oven is cleaned out and that it's clear. And many of us don't do that. We just run the oven the same, expecting the same results, even though it's been on for a really long time. Third part of this is really the hormones. So, if we're talking about this recipe being kind of your metabolism, hormones are like those little special ingredients that tell your oven how hot to get. So they can change how fast or slow that your metabolism actually works. So when you're going through big changes like puberty, some type of hormonal change, it can really make your oven work differently. So just like two ovens don't cook the same, two people don't have the same metabolism. And that's what makes us all unique. Some of us burn calories really quick, like a hot oven. Others might burn it more slowly, like an oven set at a lower temperature. And that's why it's really key for you to be able to listen to your body and eat foods that make you feel good and energized, no matter how fast or slow your metabolism is. All of this to say that being super rigid with your macro tracking actually doesn't really account for these individual differences. So you're going to find that it might lead to a stall in your weight or no change in your weight when trying to make those adjustments. So, as a great example for me, when I was going through high school into my college years, my metabolism was absolutely on fire. I was eating about 6,800 calories a day. I was tracking my macros, more than 250 grams of protein. It was literally close to, I think it was 440 or 480 grams of carbs, which was ridiculous, and over 100 grams of fats. And I was consuming that every single day, trying to gain weight, trying to put on muscle. But what I found was as I continued to eat more and more, I would just go to the bathroom more and more. I started having more digestive issues because I wasn't able to process all of that food. And I was actually destroying my own oven because I was not taking into account the fact that my metabolism was really new, that my furnace was burning over time, and that I just needed to be patient with the process. Then, after going through my treatments, after having all of my hormonal imbalance issues, what ended up happening is my oven slowed right down, where I was never hungry. I could only eat one meal and then I felt super full. And really, what I had to do was then focus on fixing the oven, fixing the metabolism, fixing how I burn my calories before then looking at the things like macronutrients. So I couldn't focus on the macros because at that time I was so sick and so really disgusted by food. Like I had no appetite whatsoever, that just forcing myself to eat was hard enough. So it didn't make sense for me to continue to push that in order for, me just to get the food down. So that's huge. Now, for point number 3, the reason why macros don't work is the stress hormone connection. So essentially, our body has a stress hormone called cortisol, and cortisol is the energy usage hormone. So essentially, when you wake up every single morning, cortisol is supposed to start super high. And then as you go through the day, it uses that gas tank and you go down into a deep sleep or into a rest. When we're looking at the way our body uses energy, our body uses energy not at a steady and consistent state, but in fluctuations depending on how stressed we are, what we're doing in the moment, our activity, however many things we have on the go. So cortisol has to fluctuate wildly, and that means that your intake might vary a little bit day to day. So you might be a little bit hungrier today than you were yesterday. You might not be as hungry the day after as you were today. Those things change in relation to how you're using that active gas tank. So if someone is super stressed out, they use, burn, and activate more calories more than someone who's not in a stress state, which changes how much you have to eat. So sometimes someone might be super obsessive about tracking their macros, and then they start getting a lot of stress when it comes around food. They start getting anxiety around food, which then starts to disrupt how much energy they're actually leading. And if we are leading with so much energy usage up front, the body gets really scared. And it's like, I don't want to use all the energy. I'm starting to feel like you're using more energy than I have. So I'm going to signal my body to store more weight just in case. And this is where that change in stress can lead to weight gain or even type of maintenance challenges. So, from a stress perspective, the higher level of stress we have, the more calories start to be burned and used, the more desperate the body becomes to actually store energy, which then it will store in the form of fat. Now, temporarily, that might cause a slight weight dip, which is what people tend to see whenever they're dieting initially. They'll see, like, oh, I'm down 5 pounds, I'm down 10 pounds. But then as you start going through months, couple months, 6 months, 7 months, then it's like, oh shit, my weight is back up. I'm starting to have fat in places I didn't have it before. Now you have what's called stress fat. And stress fat is a lot harder to lose than regular fat because it's thicker, it clumps and sticks more into the deep tissues because your fat can actually convert from two different types. So you want to make sure that you're, of course, managing your level of stress each and every day, because if you're not, tracking your macros is not going to make sense because your energy usage and the expenditure is all over the place. At least that's what I found with some of our clients as well too. From that perspective, we go into kind of our talking point 4, which is basically mindful eating. So when we are tracking macros, we are forcing the body to eat a certain amount of proteins, carbs, and fats every single day, which may not be conducive to how we're feeling hunger and fullness wise. So there have been days where I don't eat a lunch because I literally am not hungry for lunch. And I do this to this day, and that's fine. Or days where I think to myself, you know what, dinner I normally have at 5, but I'm going to have at 7 because I'm not hungry right now. Mindful eating, eating when you're hungry, eating to fuel your body, is how we practice balance. And when we lock someone into tracking macronutrients, and this is a personal story that I'll share for myself, there were days where I was trying to hit my macros. I still had another 2 meals into me, and or that I had to take in, and I was so full. I literally couldn't eat anymore. And I was like, oh, this is terrible. And I was just trying to stuff myself, not listening to my hunger and fullness cue. There are also days when I was doing fitness competitions where I would cut, where I was ravenous. I was starving, just like desperately wanting food. But I was like, nope, I have these set of macros. I have to stay to the macros. So if you're not mindful eating, it can actually push you to this point of having a really bad relationship with food where you're always stressed out when you're eating. You're always weighing every almond that comes on your plate. And that's why essentially I discourage a lot of food apps for tracking and why I don't use tracking in our Vantage program, because the way that I look at it is like, it's of course important for people to be aware of what type of food is going into their body and how much, but you don't need to be tracking every single almond or every cashew or every tablespoon of nut butter for you to hit your goals. It's about making sure that you have mindful eating and that there's balance inside your life. So the way that I would tell clients to do in our programs is I tell them, hey, look, here's some rough measurements. The measurements are going to be something you start with for the first 2 or 3 weeks, just so you can understand how much you need roughly per day. And then we're going to throw away the measurements because it's about that mindful eating and that just long term success moving forward. Right now, another thing when it comes to this is hunger and fullness cues. So when our body is in a state of alignment with hunger and fullness cues, you get regulated energy. So what happens is if we go through the entire day, we're hungry, we eat, we're full, we don't eat, the body's energy usage is stable and so is the digestion. If someone is in the state where they're either under eating because their macros are wrong or overeating because maybe they just have their macros way too high, it creates these spikes in your hormone, which is leptin and ghrelin, because it changes the way your hunger and your fullness signal operates. So you start to get these weird hunger signals that like you can't pinpoint to what the heck is going on. And that's because the food is off and you're not realizing it when it comes to that. Now, the last talking point that I want to share with the macro perspective is the long-term sustainability factor. So I talked a lot about clients with this where the word diet, period, forget even tracking macros. The only way that food is sustainable long term is if it's something that you can realistically maintain. And people often think, hey, I'm going to do macro tracking. It's really easy for me. There is no way in hell you're going to be willing, ready, or excited to track your food and weigh every almond on your plate for the rest of your life. There's just no way where you go in and you're like, all right, got to have the same half a cup of this and 3 ounces of this. It doesn't allow you the ability for you to be able to go to a restaurant, for you to randomly eat with friends, for you to make a last minute change where maybe you have to go here for work instead of going to your original location. Tracking macros does not lead for flexibility. And while people just think, oh, I can just continue to input my macros as I go along, again, this goes back to one of the earlier points, the micronutrient part, the first one with the car, where if you're making decisions on the fly with your macros and you're not choosing really good food, you're not getting the nutrients in. So for me, I'm always speaking to clients all the time who are like, I tracked macros for 2 years and it didn't work for me. I weighed all of my food and it was just too hard for me to keep track of, or I didn't want to weigh my food anymore. I wanted to go somewhere and not take a pre-prepped meal. Food is essentially a lifestyle, and there's a high potential of you developing a food disorder, frustrations with food, poor food relationship, where you're always having to track, weigh, and put things on a scale, as opposed to if you just listened to your body and you just knew the rough amounts that you needed to eat every single day. So, like, people ask me and Lorna all the time, like, oh, like, how do you guys eat? Like, we eat like regular human beings. Like, I don't take a scale with me to a restaurant. I don't, um, I'm not ordering out stuff from, Uber Eats or whatever. I tend to make my food from home. Like, I just pick good quality food. I make sure that it has the vitamins and minerals that I need from the micro perspective. And then I know the rough portions or the rough measurements of my daily intake. So if I'm plus or minus 200 calories, it's not going to be a big deal because it doesn't change the way that my body is operating. And you can essentially do that too. It's about making sure that you've got that long term sustainability, because people get to this point where they have an obsession over numbers. Just like people can obsess over their weight, they start to obsess over the way they track. They start to obsess over, I want the macros to get smaller and smaller. I want to hit each one identical every single day. I want to start taking all of my pictures every day. And this obsession over the numbers, the problem is once you hit the number, like there's nothing else. There's no excitement. There's no challenge. There's no change. So this is why you can't even use the numbers. For me, even though I have to look at numbers as a coach, I do it in a way where I'm looking at what is the end objective for this person. If this person is like, hey, I need to lose 30 pounds because I'm starting to have hormonal issues, I'm starting to have digestive stuff, I don't really care about the 30 pounds. Like, yes, that's the objective. Okay, let's get that down. But to me, the wins of the digestion, the wins of the lack of bloating, the wins of my hormones being on track, those are the real wins. But if we're only focusing on 3.2 pounds today or 2.2 pounds tomorrow, then you're not really fully enjoying the process of what living a healthy lifestyle should be. The more you add in that you have to track and measure and put on a scale, the more overwhelmed you're going to become. And that's just going to be a lot harder for you. So those are the 5 reasons why I don't think macros are a really good fit. That first one being the macronutrients don't focus on micronutrients. And if you don't have the vitamins and minerals for your hormones, proteins, carbs, and fats are only going to get you so far. The second thing being that speed of your oven. Everyone has a different metabolism. And if you just think you're going to, using some bare bones formula, create a set of numbers and then there you go, it works for everyone, it doesn't work that way. The stress is going to be the biggest thing when it comes to weight management or weight loss. You have to manage your operating stressors. Activity is a stressor, your work is a stressor. So if you're not doing those things, the macros aren't going to matter. And then, of course, making sure that we're looking at the hunger and fullness cues so that way people actually eat when they're hungry and stop when they're full, regardless of what the macros say. So I wanted to share this today because people tend to do really drastic things because on a number scale or with math, they seem to work. Like in theory, you can take your macros down to 1,200 calories and lose like 10 pounds a week. You could, but it's going to be really hard on your body. Your metabolism is going to go for shit afterwards. You're going to be super hungry. You're going to have wild cravings. So in this case, more tracking is not better, more weighing is not better, and more reduction is not better. And that's why I don't recommend macronutrients. What I recommend is essentially eating right for your body type. So understanding what hormones are off within your body to help balance them. I'm a big believer in micronutrients because those vitamins and minerals, as long as we have the raw, abundant, and building blocks that are within our body, we're always going to be able to create whatever we need. And I'm a big believer in recovery. The food is only one piece of hitting your results. You also need to make sure that your sleep is good, that your rest is good, that you're not overtraining. And many people overlook that just because they think to themselves, well, the food is going to save everything or be the end all be all. And it's a large portion of it. I'll say food is probably 80%, but it is not everything. It's food, recovery, stress, exercise. That's the kind of order that it goes in. So I would encourage you to take a look at, are you tracking macros? Are you using an app? If so, get rid of it. You're probably not seeing any results with it anyways, because that's just the way that these apps work. Ultimately, I think the reason why the attraction to macros and the app is there is because it's very logical. Like the app is like hit these numbers every day and someone does it. They don't have to think. They just can be kind of reactive. But unfortunately, with your hunger and your fullness, you have to be active with it. You have to think, am I actually hungry? Do I want this food? How am I feeling? Is my body responding well? Is it recovering properly? If it's not, then that's where you need to make the adjustments with the food. So of course you can continue to see the results that you want, right? Because ultimately we want to be able to prioritize long-term lifestyle change so that way you can maintain this for the long haul. That's the whole purpose of it. So that's all for this episode of the Hormone Helper podcast. And thanks for listening into the macros, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye. Well, it seems I'm all out of info juice for today. That's all for this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Please leave a raving review for me if you've learned something good, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Now, if you're in the mood for some more great content and tools to get your hormones on track, why not check out our free Facebook group and the blog on our site? We do amazing weekly trainings in our group that me and my wife call Tea and Teachings that give good tips for anything hormones and metabolism related. It's also a great community where you get to share your goals and success with like-minded people just like you. I'll make sure to drop both the Facebook group link and the blog link in the show notes for you. Or if you're ambitious like me, the name of the group is Weight Loss and Balanced Hormones. It'll say Fit for All beside it with a picture of me. So come and join us and have more fun.